All right, my friends, it is time to talk about my favorite books of 2025. And this is one of those, let's see, one, two, I have exactly 10. This was not my best reading year. Not my best reading year. I set a goal at the beginning of the year for 80, 85 books. I can't remember exactly what I set the goal for. And ultimately, I finished with 40. So, I want to encourage you. If you're like me, you set a lofty goal, and you find that you're not going to be able to reach it, change your goal. It's fine. It's your goal. It's arbitrary anyway. If it's something you can push through and you can do, obviously use that goal to motivate you. That's what the goal is there for. It's to motivate you to do better. But if you can't, if you're like, okay, I'm trying to meet that goal and it's just not happening, then it's okay. It's okay. The goal is meant to motivate you. Let it do what it does, and then change the goal, because I like to meet my goal. So, especially with Goodreads, I hate seeing one of those little reading challenge stamps with no check mark on it. I don't know, that just bothers me. So I changed my goal to 40 books, and I met my goal. It's a little disappointing for me overall, but still. And I know that I didn't write down every book that I read, because I read a book a week to kids every week. So that would have immediately raised the number, but I must have missed some of those that I read to the kids. But that's okay. It's okay. Ultimately, what I want to talk about is the 10 books that I read that I really, really loved. And I am going to try and put like a little picture of the book right here as I go through, so that you can enjoy the top books as well. So let's get started. First of all, and these are just in the order that I read them. If you've watched my video about my favorite albums of the year, same kind of thing. It's really hard for me to actually come to like a number term, like I read this many, whatever. So I'm going to say this is just the order that I read them in, and I loved them. If there's one that especially stands out, hopefully you'll hear that when I describe it a little bit. And some of these will warrant a little bit more description than others. So first of all, first book is, the name of the band is REM by Peter Ames Carlin. That is a book that I bought at the very beginning of the year last year, 2025. I'm recording this January 2nd, 2026. And it was such a good book. I love REM so much, but I don't know a ton about them. And there's a lot of their music that I really haven't listened to. So maybe some of you guys would want to throw shade at me and say that I'm not a real fan, and that's fine. But I'll say that Automatic for the People is one of my all-time favorite albums. It is a flawless album, and it really made me love REM. I definitely hope to pick up more REM in the future. I don't have many of their albums on vinyl. However, name of the band is REM, talks a lot about them as a band, and I think they're really unique as a band in that they sort of like made this sort of commitment to each other. We're doing this together, and when we can no longer do this together, we will no longer be a band. And our season will have just passed. And also the idea that like, when we're done, we're done. We don't need to come back. We'd be ruining the good thing that was REM. So that's a really fascinating thing to read about. And just to hear about like all the challenges that they faced over the years, health issues, that kind of stuff. It's just really fascinating. So highly recommend, if you love the band REM, it's a really phenomenal book. So second book, and you're really going to see a lot of this. There's a lot of this year. Second book is another music sort of biography. This one's a memoir, and it's called Fahrenheit 182 by Mark Hoppus. Blink-182, definitely one of my favorite bands in the 90s. Still really appreciate them as a band. For me, at the time that I was listening to them in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were like a guilty pleasure, because I primarily listened to Christian music, and Blink-182 was definitely not that. This book really does an interesting job of kind of looking at life through Mark Hoppus's eyes, looking at all the challenges they faced, the band breaking up, Travis's accident, all that kind of stuff through his eyes, and then sort of the coming back together. And it sort of culminates with his cancer diagnosis and some of that process of the cancer. I almost wish that there was more of that, because it ended up bringing the band back together, and I got to go see them live on their first tour after they came back together. So it's a great book. If you love Blink-182, I highly recommend it. There's like deluxe editions out there that are quite expensive with really cool covers and slipcases. So if you're a big collector, I want to encourage you to get one of those. But otherwise, it's great the way it is. Third book, another music biography memoir. This one is called Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna. So Kathleen Hanna is the lead singer of Bikini Kill, kind of the founder of Bikini Kill, which many people kind of credit them with being sort of the foundation of Riot Girl Punk. I think that in the book, she sort of argues that that it wasn't just them. There were several other bands that were really integral and bands that had inspired them to do what they did. But also there were other bands right there with them doing the same things. And so I love that. It goes through not only the days of Bikini Kill, goes into La Tigre a little bit. We learn a lot about the stuff that Kathleen Hanna went through. And listen, I think for me, one of the things that was most powerful about this book, being a dude, is to really get a feel for how horribly guys can treat women. Specifically, how frequently she was SA'd or sexually harassed, or it's just heartbreaking to see how many times this human being can be sort of just objectified and treated badly and beyond. And so it really sort of solidified my passion to want to stand for women, stand with women, and fight for women's freedom in every area, for them to have the ability to just live a life without harassment, with control over their own lives, their own bodies, that kind of thing. So it's really good. I highly recommend it. I read that this summer and loved it. I read a couple Star Wars books this year. Not a ton. I wish I would have read more. But Convergence by Zoraida Cordova was a really good one that I really enjoyed. And I listened to that one primarily on audiobook, but I did also read it because I tend to go back and forth between the two. I am so far behind in the High Republic. I mean, it's basically mostly done at this point, and I have so much to read. I'm in the second phase, but I still highly recommend everything related to the High Republic. It's so good. The next book, and actually the next 3 books, are really just general nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction this year. So the first one is The Widening of God's Mercy by Richard B. Hayes and Christopher B. Hayes. And this is a really interesting book. So this book is primarily dealing with the issue of sexuality in the church, specifically dealing with it's sort of a call for the inclusiveness of LGBTQIA people. And partially, it's doing that through the lens of showing that if you look at the Bible as a complete document, it's a collection of books, obviously, but if you look at it from beginning to end, one of the things that you see as a trend from Genesis through Revelation is this idea that so many times there's sort of boundaries set to say, these are the chosen people and these are not. And yet as the book continues, as the Bible continues, you find that those people who are excluded are often later brought in and included, even though they were once said to be other than. God's mercy widens to bring them in, to accept them, to welcome them into his kingdom. So that's what that book does. Now, Richard B. Hayes is sort of famous for writing this sort of morality book, sort of this is how we should view morality as Christians back in the, I believe, late 80s, early 90s. It was very key to the religious right. It sort of was a tool that they used to sort of make homosexuality and abortion the key 2 issues for conservative Christianity. He is one of the writers in this, along with his son. So I believe he is a New Testament scholar, and his son is an Old Testament scholar. Both of them seminary professors, ethicists, but they are sort of saying hey, that was never meant to be this is the way it should be. It was sort of this is what I'm thinking at the time. I have room to grow. And now I see it's been used to do harm, and I want to undo that. And so that is sort of the call in The Widening of God's Mercy, is to recognize that God's mercy is constantly widening to include more people. All right, so next is Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection by John Green. So John Green has long been one of my favorite authors of all time. He was first a young adult fiction writer and has now written a couple of nonfiction works, which I did not think that I would enjoy to the extent that I have. But his book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, might be my favorite work of his. I don't know. It's that or Looking for Alaska. No, it's that or Paper Towns. There's so many. But Everything is Tuberculosis is a shorter work, and it primarily deals with the history of tuberculosis. It does it through the narrative story of a young man named Henry that John Green met, and his journey. And I think it's very, very interesting to see the ways in which the medical system has been built to make money rather than save lives. And I think it's interesting that we should be challenging that. We should be fighting against that narrative and saying no more. We need to save lives when we can. Highly recommend it. Short read, really, really good. Another nonfiction work here is Better Ways to Read the Bible by Zach W. Lambert. This is a phenomenal book. If you're deconstructing your faith, if you're looking at the ways that you've been raised to understand the Bible, and you're saying, I just don't know. This is a great book that kind of looks at 4 lenses that we can view the Bible through that are incredibly harmful and destructive. And it sort of replaces those with 4 other ways that are much more healthy and wonderful ways. So I think it's a book that everyone should own. I highly recommend it. Next book here is Such Great Heights, The Complete Cultural History of the Indie Rock Explosion by Chris DeVille. This is a music history book. So most of the music books so far have been biographies or memoirs. This is actually the history of a genre. I read a really good one of these a couple of years ago that was about emo called Where Are Your Boys At? This one is really about indie rock. So if you love stuff like Death Cab for Cutie, this is a book that you'll really enjoy kind of going through. You'll learn a lot about the bands that you love, and I can't recommend it enough. It's really great. Another music memoir biography, The Harder I Fight, The More I Love You by Nico Case. Fantastic music biography, memoir, her own perspective on her. This is another one of those where you're just like, my goodness, the things that this young lady has gone through to later become a member of the band The New Pornographers and ultimately a solo artist. It just made me appreciate her that much more. She's got a phenomenal voice, and I think it's so interesting to see her wrestling with her own insecurities, especially because you look at someone who's made it, who's won awards, who's been on award shows, who's sold thousands, maybe millions of copies of their albums, and you look at that and you think they've got to be like so confident, and you see that that's not really the case. And so that's, I think, something that's incredibly powerful for someone like me who struggles with my own view of myself. So last book out of the top 10, The Mythmakers, The Remarkable Fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. So this one is a graphic novel, sort of a graphic biography, done in a really, really interesting way. You see this sort of lion and this wizard taking us through this journey to explain the foundation of the literature for J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, to talk about their friendship, their lives, the things that they experienced. Now, I took a class at Dallas Baptist University on J.R.R. Tolkien, and I took a class on C.S. Lewis, and I had phenomenal professors, read so much of the works of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, read a bunch of biographies because I had to write papers about these guys, and ultimately, I learned a lot about them in this graphic novel. So I'm really appreciative of this work, and it's one, I don't currently own it. I checked it out from the library, but it's one I definitely plan on adding to my collection. So I highly recommend that you pick it up. So that's my top 10 books. A lot of music biographies, memoirs, and histories, a few nonfiction, one graphic novel, some Star Wars. I hope to read a lot more this next year. I've already got about 11 books planned out for next year, which I'll talk about in my plans for next year. My goal is to read 52 books next year, which is a step down from the 80 I planned this year, but a step up from the 40 that I got this year. So anyway, what have you read this year? Did you like some of these? Like, comment, and subscribe below. And I got more videos coming probably today about some of my favorites, so check back in.